Cam Cathcart.
Dude, what's up?
What's up, man? Got a question for you.
Yes.
Have you read that new book about the anti-gravity that just came out?
No.
It's impossible to put down. Pretty good, right?
It is a good one.
Yeah, you didn't expect that.
No.
Well, glad to have you here today.
Dude, I'm excited, man.
Dude, we just filmed this podcast episode. Actually, you were at your house. I was at mine. And
Yes.
we were digital this time. And then as soon as we got done, you came over to my house to film this intro.
Yes.
So this episode is unlike probably anything we've done before.
It is. Yeah. We don't talk a lot about real estate.
We don't talk a ton about real estate with a guy who owns $5.5 billion of real estate.
Yeah, our biggest real estate investor we've ever had on this show.
Yes. And we talked very little about real estate. I mean, in the beginning, we get a story and what he does. But the truth is, like, most people listen to the show, like you guys listening, they're probably not, they're not going to buy a bank. Like he's merging the bank he owns with another bank. They're not gonna, so we didn't need to dive into that today. But most people listening to the show have kids. Most people have relationships. Most people have some kind of faith. And so we delve into a lot of those topics in a way that, like, I'm going to put this is going to be a bold statement, but I will say this, that I think this will go down as one of those like life pivot, like changing podcasts, like one of my top in my entire life, like where like my life was going one direction. I think this podcast, some of the stuff he talked about there with like the compass.
Oh yeah.
Like I will change how I operate my life based on this podcast.
Dude, it was absolutely incredible. And what we did talk about is like, what are the systems that he put into his life, not only just within business, but with his family, with his friends, the way that he works, the way that he sets a vision and does
and work backwards again.
Exactly work backwards. Like all of those things contributed to him having a $5.5 billion portfolio. And that's what we dove into. And I say this at the end of the podcast, but like everything he said, he has a lot of books he was talking about. Like I literally spent a couple $100 today as he was
bought a bunch of books too.
So
lots of recommendations today, lots of books, lots of topics, everything from raising capital to raising children and everything in between. All right, let's get to the show. Don Wenner, welcome to the podcast, man.
Well, thank you for having me. What an awesome opportunity. I wish I was there in Hawaii with you, but glad to be here with virtually.
Yeah, man. You're in Florida though. That's like Hawaii light, so that kind of counts.
Yeah, pretty nice. About 75 and sunny right now. So.
Oof. Yeah.
I was gonna say there's a cold front here in Hawaii right now, so it's 73 degrees.
It's
and
rough.
It's miserable.
Oh
yeah, I'm wearing a sweatshirt.
All right, man. So Don, I know you as obviously a husband, a father of 3. I know you as a real estate investor that got started a long time ago and built up a $5.5 billion portfolio through DLP Capital. You guys are a titan in the industry. I mean, like you're the guys that we're all comparing ourselves to, saying like, oh, but this is how DLP does it. Like, I know you as just a legend in the space, so I'm super honored to have you today. But take us back maybe before that, like before all that happened. Who was Don Wenner?
Well, thank you for that. I like that framing that a long time ago, because I always get, this happened so fast, but it doesn't feel that fast. It's been over 19 years now. But quick backstory. I grew up in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And, my story is, I think of it as a story of God doing amazing things. I verse in my life is to whom much is given, much is required. And, I believe I was given a lot. I was raised by 2 parents who had me at 16 years old. So they were juniors in high school, the oldest of 5. And so they didn't finish high school. My mom ran a home daycare in our household growing up. And my father was a correction officer. They were divorced when I was young. And we moved around a lot. Sort of, I didn't realize this too much later in my career. And probably one of the big reasons to why our business is focused on what it is I moved 37 times by the time I was 17 years old, which is when I moved out of my parents' house. I figured the world out. I was going to go out on my own and waited tables through high school and went to college for finance, knowing what I was going to do. I was going to be a financial planner, wealth manager. Knew that from middle school on because they made more money than doctors, lawyers, accountants. And you had to be an entrepreneurial and good at math is what I believed. And then stumbled into real estate like many of us do at 20 years old as a college student. And that was October 2006 that my real estate career began. And that was the peak of the real estate market. That month literally was the high point in the market in Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania, where I grew up. And I was a real estate agent. And my business was built around finding homeowners who needed to sell their home, and our marketing message was your home sold guaranteed or we'll buy it. And then we did an immediate buyout program, and we just got in front of lots of individual homeowners who had a reason to sell and helped them find solutions. And it grew from there. But I'll kind of pause there. But that's sort of the backstory to how I got into real estate, and it's been a great ride since.
Yeah, you and I got in pretty much at the same time. Then I was 06 when I got in. You guys, we're also the same age. You just turned You just turned 40. I'm about to turn 40. So yeah, it's funny. Our stories kind of go together. You just happened to buy 5 times more real estate than I did. So I'm going to learn from you today, which is awesome. So a couple of questions there. When did you transition then from that world of real estate sales into real estate investing, and how did that transition go? Maybe walk us through that.
Yeah, for me, in the beginning, it wasn't as much of a transition as it was a situation of and so started as a real estate agent and had motivated homeowners who would call us. We were doing radio marketing and all different things that to get in front of people, and which I can talk lots about. A lot of fun there, and a lot of those people needed to sell fast. It's going through 2007 and 8, and so we started stepping in and buying homes from people, and it really wasn't sort of a plan, but that's what we started doing as a way to create solutions. And then we were trying to find contractors to renovate those homes, which is very, very difficult in a small market to find good contractors to renovate old single family homes with septic systems and slate roofs. And so then we started a construction company. I took my best contractor and brought him in house, and now we're a construction company too. And then we had people who couldn't. We were also doing thousands of short sales through that time all over the country, and we started having people who couldn't buy homes anymore because their credit was beat up, and so we started renting them homes. And all of a sudden, we were in property management, and all of a sudden, we had a real estate portfolio. And then when you start holding real estate, you're not selling it right away as fast as possible. All of a sudden, you need more money, and so that's when we said we're going to launch an investment fund. And that was really our journey over our first 6-7 years. And kind of thing that was unique to us, I think, when we decided very early on we weren't going to do a sort of a syndication model. We were going to be in the fund business, and we decided really early on that fund management, managing capital for individual investors, was going to be our core business. And it wasn't the means to the end, right? It wasn't the necessity to do real estate deals. It quickly became the core business. And then it evolved from there. And actually today, even though we own about 20,000 rental homes in our ownership portfolio, that's multifamily, single family, a little bit of manufactured housing. Not only do we have about a 7,000 home development and construction pipeline going, our bigger business is actually today, which didn't start in 2014. We actually provide capital to other developers, builders, and operators. So that's actually the much larger side of our business today.
Really?
Is the transition of providing capital to others. Yep.
Can you explain that a little? I'd love to dig into that. Literally yesterday I had a conversation with a dude about, I'm like, maybe Open Door Capital should get into that game a little bit. I didn't know that's what, walk us through. How do you do that? What does that mean? You provide capital?
Yeah. So, in 2000, again, started 2006 to 2014, we were a direct sponsor, right? We were operating initially with scattered site, single family homes, 10 units and 20 unit buildings. Then, it grew, but it was us all as a sponsor. And in 2014 is when I got, really clear on what I'm called to do, which is to transform lives through the building of thriving communities. And I got really clear that we could make a much bigger impact in the lives of our residents if we invested in the whole community. And I could spend lots of time talking about that, but that's what we decided in 2014. And that's when we actually bought our first large scale, apartment communities. That's when we started developing our first brand new rental communities, build for rent, before that had a name. And that's also the same exact time we decided to scale. Our capital was starting to pick up pace, and to scale by providing capital to others. So that started at all senior construction lending. So development, construction, value add type lending, first position loans, and that's what we did. And that's still the biggest out of our business. This year we'll do $1.5 billion, $1.6 billion as a senior lender. But then over the years, we've also expanded into joint ventures, preferred equity, mezzanine financing. So we provide, kind of generally categorized as, up to 91, 92% of the capital stack with sponsors. But really providing the capital is we think about it, it's just certainly what people come to us for. That's certainly, often where the relationship begins. but it's really just the starting point of really what our job is and what we do and the relationships with those we provide capital with. So today we have, $4 billion of our capital with other sponsors. And that's about 50 sponsors that we have our capital deployed with. And we look to go really, really deep with them, over long periods of time.
A couple questions on that on front side, and I know I'm probably hogging the mic today, Cam, so jump in wherever you want. But I'm fascinated by this. Okay, so I'm assuming you're raising capital from someone. I want to get who that is. That's first question, and then how do you decide who to give it to? Like, what are the criteria that you're going to lend to? So first of all, who are you getting the money from? Is this institutions or? Yeah.
So to this point in time, which I explained kind of our strategy for, but at this point in time, most everything we have done, 98% of our capital has been direct from individual, families. We think about it, high net worth families, wealth creators primarily. And so we have 3,500 families invested with us today across our investment funds. So we have an investment fund that does just senior secured lending, one that does mezzanine, one that does equity into brand new housing, one that does equity into existing housing. And so that's 3,500 families invested in those funds. Last year, to give you a framework, last year we added 492 new investors, new families invested with us last year. But 70% of our capital, give or take 1 or 2%, 70% of our capital every year is existing investors adding more money with us. And then the 30% that's new, about half of the new, those 492 people last year, half were referrals from, the 3,000 investors we had, at the start of the year. And then about half were new investors that, weren't a referral. And so this year, our goal is 650 new investors and $700 million of new equity invested in our funds.
Dude, okay, so the referral makes sense. You get, people get a good return from you. They say, I like working with these guys. Hey, I'm talking to my dentist. I say, yeah, you got to check them out. That makes sense. And then the repeat customers make sense. So where are you getting, where are other people hearing about you? I mean, it's just things like this, podcasting, or do you guys do conferences, or where's that come from?
Yes. So we do, it's not, kind of like anything else. It's not, everybody wants, right, a secret, single solution to it. And it's not, it's doing basic fundamental things of sales and marketing, consistently. So in the beginning, when we got started in raising capital into funds, which was in 2012, it started with conservative talk radio. And we still do that to this day. We do that in our local markets. And so, but that's really kind of was the first example of what we've done since, which is finding somebody who has influence, and leveraging that influence, right? Building trust with that person, leveraging that influence. So example, a morning personality on a conservative talk radio station has trust with his audience, right? So the gentleman I started doing these commercials with 12, 13 years ago, he had already been on air for 27 years as the morning personality to his local audience, right? And he invested with me. And actually, he first started endorsing me in my real estate brokerage. So the advantage I had was I already had this credibility in my local market as a real estate professional, right? I was selling 20% of the market. My picture was on 1,000 signs, right? So I had a little bit of credibility, but I was in my mid 20s and never managed any capital, right? So, but that I knew that radio had worked for me in my real estate brokerage. So I went to the station that worked best, which was conservative talk radio, which also has the audience of people with money, right? And and we started talking about what we do in little 30 and 60-second commercials and driving people to a local dinner event. And we still do this to this day. And so in the beginning, those local dinner events, I remember the first one vividly. We were in the basement of one of my clients' office buildings, would happen to have a little bowling alley in it, and there were 18 people there. And I gave a little talk over bowling and appetizers, right? And then the next one we had 30 people, and the next one we had 40 people, and then all of a sudden we had 100 people, and now we do them in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. We have 500 people, and so we've expanded that radio approach, which not only is great for raising new capital or new investors, but also it's a great investor relation tool as well, right? Because when you have 3,500 investors, I can't talk to them all individually, but this gives them a direct connection and time with the founder, the fund manager, which is important. So that's what we started doing. And then we started saying, all right, well, where are there people who are accredited? So our investors have to be accredited. Where are there accredited investors? Who has influence within groups of accredited investors, and building influence there. So whether that's a doctor community, or groups like groups of investors who meet together, like YPO type groups, et cetera. People who are accredited, who meet around a common purpose, which may not be investing, right? But have trust with one another, and usually trust with a leader. And we build trust with that leader, right? And so we do big conferences, we do these dinner events, we do trips where we bring people together, and that becomes a really easy way for people to invite their friend, or invite their neighbor or their coworker when we're doing a free dinner. Come bring your friend out, and that becomes a big part of it. So it's all these different. And then once people get into our ecosystem from whatever way, we do a great job of communicating. Lots of email marketing. We do a webinar pretty much every week. Podcasts, regular, consistent reporting. And then maybe you could say the biggest thing of all is consistent performance. So for 13 years now of managing funds, we've hit double-digit yields in every fund in every period, never missed a return target, never fell below double digits with monthly distributions and liquidity. So we've got a great product, certainly, and a great performance track record that's created momentum. And now today we do bring in money through registered investment advisors, financial advisors, and endowments and things like that. But to our history, that's only been less than 10% of the capital. In the future, that'll probably be 30%, 40% of the capital. But we love serving, high net worth families directly, and pouring into them and adding value to their lives.
That's amazing. Awesome. So question for you, Don, because a lot of our listeners, they're right now trying to raise money to buy a $250,000 house. And you obviously just become incredible at raising money. So how would you take what you have done and tell a beginner to raise $250,000 just to buy that very first investment property?
Yeah, I mean, if you're buying your very first investment property for $250,000, first thing I'd say is, you can get the majority of the capital. I mean, assuming you have decent credit and aren't a felon and so forth, right? You can get 80% of that capital from a lender, right? And there's lots of good private lenders who do that type of lending. So if you need 250 grand, you can get 200 grand from a lender. Now you only need 50 grand, right? So getting that 50 grand when it's your very first deal, you're going to have to trade your credibility and the relationships you've garnered over whatever you've done to that point, right? It's going to be family and friends is what people like to call it, right? It's going to be somebody who knows and trusts you as a person, even though you don't have a track record as an investor for that 50 grand, right? No. Ideally, hopefully, at least you're able to put in 10 or 15 grand of that, right? And somebody's going to come bring you the other 30, 35 as an example, right? If you're doing your first small investments, but or have expectations, you're going to do something, bigger, and you're going to, do a lot more of them. That's when you think about something bigger early on. But if it's the very first one or two, I don't know if there's any other way than just, using private lenders to bring in, 75, 80% of the capital, and then, leveraging your name and your credibility with people who know you and trust you.
Awesome. And then a secondary question to that would be, you said, you've been managing the fund for 13 years. You're only 39 because your 40th birthday is coming up. Like, how did you?
Mine's 40. He just turned 40.
You just turned 40. Gotcha.
You don't put us on the same level here, Cam. Come on, man.
But dude, at 26, 27 years old, raising that type of capital, like you had to have been doing something special to establish trust from these investors. And what was that secret sauce for you?
So in 2013, which was our first kind of full year as a fund manager, we launched our first fund in 2012. We went to a strategic planning session in December, January of that year, and I had this kind of 4x6 whiteboard, right? And on top of that whiteboard, I wrote this goal: raise $5 million of equity that year. And when I walked in with our leadership team at that time, that seemed like this monumental goal, right? And it's funny because one of the gentlemen who actually I gave my real estate brokerage to last year and now owns it, has that whiteboard sitting in his office as kind of a humble reminder to him. And he was in the room at that time and remembers that, of how he said that was going to be this tremendous goal, right? And so at that time, my biggest business from a revenue standpoint, from a transaction standpoint, was still a real estate brokerage. So So until a year ago, I was the number one real estate agent in America for EXP and a top 10 real estate agent in America overall. But I hadn't sold real estate in 10 years, right? So individually. So anyway, so back then I was selling, I don't know exactly, but 1,000 homes a year, right? And so we had 1,000 home sales a year where we were going to a closing table and I could see how much people were walking away from the HUD with, right? The closing statement. And I was calling every closing when I saw the HUDs come across. I was making sure I was calling anybody who walked away with 50 grand, or I was showing up to the closing table or calling them, a couple weeks before closing and saying, hey, what are you going to do with the 100 grand you're getting from the sale of this home, right? And I was giving them a pitch for what we did, right? I was calling on every banker, every attorney, every CPA in my market who I had a little bit of credibility, I'd done transactions with. And that very first year, what happened, one of the things that happened for me was, and we ended up that year raising, 10 million, was the bank that I was borrowing from as an individual to do my home flips and such. That bank was being purchased by a bigger bank. And so all the shareholders were going to have this liquidity event. So I got the senior loan officer to schedule me a meeting with the chairman, who was the guy who set the investment up. And we sat down for lunch and built with him. And he had seen my credit come through credit committee a whole bunch of times and heard my story. And it was a big deal when a 25-year-old's buying, hundreds of houses a year. It's kind of a big deal to a local bank. Like, what is going on here, right? So they knew who I was and saw my credit coming through. And so I pitched him, and he brought like 7 or 8 people, and they invested, 700 grand combined or something, right? But that was a big win, and they were known people in my market. And funny sort of story, I didn't mention this yet, but I own a bank, and I'm actually doing a bank merger too, and that's a huge part of our business forward. And that meeting also kind of was the foundation and got my interest into banking and led to kind of one of our key business lines today. But so it was 5 million was the goal that year. We hit 10, and the next year we hit 18, and the next year we hit 40, and the next year we hit 50, and the next year we hit 80, and so it's just been this steady growth year over year over year. But in the beginning, there was nothing. I started doing the radio, like I talked about, bringing people to small events, but it was really, personally calling on every lead, calling on every investor, trying to, taking a lot of no. And I was the only person doing that until we got to about 450 investors. But up until that point, it was me sitting down with every person one-on-one, giving them a high energy pitch, right? And this was in Pennsylvania. And so I'd sit down with people. I remember this vividly back then. They say, well, why are you going to buy housing, distressed homes, apartments? Why aren't you buying office buildings in New Jersey, right? Like, this doesn't make any sense. Why would you want to buy houses, right? Like, not only did I have no experience, but people couldn't make sense of why did this make sense, right? And so, but just lots of energy, right? And people bet on people, right? And people believe in people who have conviction, who have confidence, who have energy. And you keep calling on them again and again and again with excitement and energy, talking about things we're doing, sharing out whatever, basic marketing I could at that time, of the things we were doing. People would take bets. They weren't big bets, people giving me 50 grand or 100 grand, right? And seeing how we did, right? And then just, communicating very, very consistently, and continuing to stay in front of them.
I would love to just emphasize something you just said that's so good, especially for people who are just getting started, but anybody, is people are attracted to people with energy. Like, you brought energy and like this momentum and this belief and this vision and this I can, we're going places. Yeah. And people are so attracted to that. And I think a lot of people, especially in the real estate, they don't have that energy because they don't have the experience. And so they just kind of timidly go in they're asking for a favor from somebody to maybe lend them some money versus this is the deal. I'm going to buy it. This is where we're taking it. We're taking the company. You want to get on board. And people yeah. So if any advice I give people on that is just pump yourself up somehow. Get that energy going. It doesn't have to be yelling into a camera like I tend to do. There's different types of energy. But yeah, people are so attracted to it.
So I have a question for you, Don, and this is a completely selfish question because I'm 33 and you own a bank. You have the largest brokerage in the United States, or one of them, 5 billion assets under management. You were at one point flipping, you do everything. How do you find, how did you balance that with being a husband and a father and a friend as you were starting off? Because it sounds like you were really, really busy.
Yeah, thank you. So I'd say, first is I got clear, as I mentioned, in 2014 on what I've been called to do, and know that my role has been to be obedient to what I've been called to do. But our first two requirements, first two purposes of our lives as a believer, I believe is to love God and love people, right? And loving people it starts first and foremost with our families, right? And so I grew up not to the most intentional parents. They had me at a very young age, and weren't thinking about these things. But I knew when my oldest was born, which was almost 13 years ago, that I was like, man, for a moment, it was like, how am I going to balance this, right? How am I going to integrate this? I'm working so hard, and very quickly realized that where the priorities were for me. I was very blessed. I knew where they were right away, and I just knew that meant I had to be more disciplined, right? And I think people confuse kind of how you prioritize things, and it requires people say, oh, I have so much to do and so much work, and I don't know how I don't know how I could get home for dinner, how I can turn it off to spend time with my family or whatever the case may be. And it's actually much easier to work 80 hours a week than it is to work 50 hours a week, right? And get the things you want done, accomplished, right? It's easy. If I know I have unlimited time, I can take my time. I can waste time. I can dilly-dally around at times, right? If I know, hey, I got to be out of here at 5:30, I got to go coach my kids' sports, or I know, hey, when I shut down this computer, get off this phone call at whatever 10 a.m. on Saturday, I'm done for the weekend, right? And I'm not, getting back on this, right? The focus you have to have is so much greater. So I'd say, what I got clear on doing pretty early on is getting clear on what was important to me as a whole. What was my purpose? Getting clear on how I want to measure success in my life, and getting clear. One of the things that a good friend of mine, his name is Lloyd Reeb. He's the co-founder of an organization called Halftime, and wrote a great book called Success to Significance. And one of the questions he likes to ask, and something I developed with his help years ago, is perfect life numbers or perfect life outcomes. And the question is if you and I were sitting and having a glass of wine or a beer or whatever, and I said to you, in 30 years from now, if your life was perfect, if we were sitting here 30 years from now and you were able to tell me, what, Don, the last 30 years of my life were perfect, what will that look like, right? What will have happened in 30 years for your life to have ended up perfect? What are the characteristics? Describe them, right? And most people have never done that, right? But if you do that and you go through that exercise, probably all three of us, if we did that right now, and many people listening, we'd come up with pretty similar things, right? We'd come up with, I want to be healthy and in good shape. I want my kids to be doing well, right? And have great relationships. If you're, a believer, I got a strong relationship with God. My marriage is going well, right? I've accomplished my business goals to some level, right? The part of it that's not probably the center of it, but some sort of results, right, in our careers. But then if I asked you, so if we had the time right now and we all did that for 10 minutes, we'd come up with similar things. But then if I asked the next question of, all right, well, what's your plan for your life to look like that? Very few have a plan that would lead to those outcomes, right? Very seldom do people have does their schedule match those outcomes they want, right? And so I got clear on that, early on, and developed these tools that we use in our companies. We use for all of our employees. We teach on a tool we call the personal compass, a tool we call the family compass, where you get really clear on the long-term 100-year type goals, and then just break it down. What am I going to accomplish this year? We call it our living fully dashboard. What am I going to accomplish this year? And early on, I started calling it living fully, and we started talking about work-life integration. And work-life balance is a broken, debilitating term, and it's about work-life integration. How do I integrate the areas of my life together? Most importantly, how do I integrate my faith across all the areas of my life? How do I integrate faith, family, friends, freedom, fun, fulfillment, fitness, and finance is what we call it. How do I pull them together to have an integrated life? And that's been the journey. Far from perfect, right? But that's been the journey I've been on for a lot of years. And I can say humbly, my wife will never say I haven't been present. I'll give you just a quick example of these kind of choices. I'm at an event right now, it just finished up. It's a 3-day event in Boca Raton. And so I flew down Monday morning to this event. I was at the event all day Monday. I flew home Monday night. My wife's birthday was on Tuesday. Took the day to spend with my wife, massages, lunch, hanging out, made it really special for her, and flew back down this morning to be back at the event because I had to present this morning, right? But that was a bunch of extra travel, right? A bunch of extra work, but I know where my priorities are.
Yeah. Dude, and you said something that I think, to me, I'm going to write it down right after this call, where it takes more discipline to work less hours than more hours. And I was even thinking last night, we had a podcast, Brandon and I, and afterwards we went to dinner. That's work, with the podcast guests. And I did it, and that's easy for me. I love talking with people. Honestly, the discipline part of me would have been like going home and helping put the kids to bed and reading them bedtime stories. And do that's for people listening to this. I think that is such incredible advice, where like we wear this, like how many hours we work is a badge of honor, but especially for men, like, and if you love what you do, that's easy. That's easy. What's hard is the, hey, I'm gonna set up my schedule to be present with my kids and present with my wife, and do the things that a father and a husband should do. So I love that, man. That's awesome.
So one quick note to that, and I mean, I have a 3-year-old, and man, it's a lot easier to stay at work than to go home and take care of the 3-year-old, right? So one of the coolest things we did that's helped us a lot over the past, we did this officially, I guess maybe 4 years ago. But we set a big, hairy, audacious goal as a family. Mm-hmm. And our big, hairy, audacious goal is 1,000 extraordinary days in 100 different places before my oldest goes to college. So we have six and a half years left. We have 6 summers left. And so the cool thing about having 1,000 extraordinary days, so it's, we have to have about 80 a year, 84 a year, and is what it has to average out to, right? So the only way you can have 84 extraordinary days is you have to spend 84 days together, right? And so an extraordinary day is a day where every person in the family has to vote at the end of the day it was extraordinary, right? But cool. The work begins. I do all the planning for this type of stuff. It's the planning that I'm going to first not work, right? But that we're going to do something together. We're going to be in a place. And then of course, to all of us go into the day with the mindset that we're going to make this an extraordinary day. Not every day turns out to be extraordinary, right? But we have enough of them that last year we ended up with 103, right? And I did that certainly working a lot of hours, certainly with a company growing 50% a year, certainly with lots of operational demands on my time and my businesses, and buying another bank and lots of things going on, right? Lots of work pressures, right? But that's integration, right? Do I ever have a day I don't check my email? No. Do I ever have a day where I don't work at all? No. I mean, Sunday, but even then, I'll do early in the morning or something, but it just takes discipline.
Mm-hmm. Can you dig a little bit more? I mean, I got a million questions on this, but you mentioned that idea of the compass, like the family compass, and then you had the other compass. Can you walk through, what does that look like, a little bit of that framework?
Yeah. So I'll start with the family one. So family compass is our long-term goals of family. So, we set 100-year goals, 50-year goals, 20-year goals. We have our family big, hairy, audacious goal that I talked about. We set a framework of family values, a family purpose statement or mission statement, family vision. Each of us as family members, we have in there each of our individual personal dream or calling. You can use different terms. For me, it's my calling. For my kids, it's their dreams at this point. We have each of our love languages, each of our strength finders, each of our behavioral assessments, each of our top 10 things that we each love. So we each know what each other loves, what our love languages are, what our strengths are. We set every year a set of family goals for the year, and we sort of frame that up and what are our goals that we're going to accomplish, together as a family. So it's just a little bit of structure. It's a, document, it's a lot on there, but and then, people we're doing life with, right? Our family friends, our family, people that we as a family are doing life with, right? And
is this something? Do people buy that? Is it a book? Do you have this? Is it a workshop? Like how can people listening to this be able to do this?
We can put it in the show notes or everyone, and I'll give the templates out and examples to anybody who's listening. Absolutely, yeah. So it's stuff we provide out. Lots of materials on this. Yeah,
dude. I know.
Yeah, well, we'll throw that. Yeah, we'll throw that in the description on YouTube and in the podcast. That's super cool, man.
I know you've written some books, but you need to write a book on this. This is so fascinating.
Yeah, family.
Yes,
family and wealth.
Run up. So one of the talks I do, which I'm happy to provide it out to people, is habits of an extraordinary family, and so we build the framework of habits, and having the kind of goals of family is a part of it, right? The rhythms of the day, the rhythms of the week, the rhythm of the month, the rhythms of a quarter and a year, and we have a set of core keystone habits is what gentleman Justin Early, who wrote Habits of the Household, I think is the name of his book. And
I love that book.
Yeah, it's awesome, right?
Yeah.
So we took some of those concepts and many others in our family, right? So we do a family meeting every month, right? And I've got a framework and a template happy to share out to how we do a family meeting. We've been doing that since our two older kids were, 5 and 6, right? We've got this great rhythm of open communication, right? We've got a rhythm of what we call a family board meeting, which we took from our good friend Jim Shields on a quarterly one-on-one with each kid. Every quarter we do like clockwork, right? And just these basic little, rhythms that you put into place that I'll tell you in 10 years if it worked, right? But that we hope are going to lead to, raising, great world changing, kids.
Dude,
Oh,
please
so
write,
good, man.
please write the book Habits of an Extraordinary Family. I want the first copy.
Thank you. Very kind.
Dude, that's okay. First of all, that's so good. Second of all, I would love at some point, we can talk about it off later, but like, I would love to have you come speak at one of our events at some point and give that talk, man. I would die to have that at like a Better Life event. Yeah, super cool. A couple more questions on this kind of topic, because I feel like we're digging into some really good stuff here. Okay, you mentioned the compass for the family one. The other one, what does that look like? And then I'll go back to the question about your calling, but let's talk the other compass.
So personal compass is centered around you. So for me, I have my family core values there, so they match mine, especially as the leader of the family, right? Same set of values, which surprise, my family values are pretty similar to my company values too, which is on purpose, of course. My purpose statement or mission statement for myself. I have my perfect life outcomes that I talked about earlier. Every year I set a verse of my life. I have my family, big, hairy, audacious goal, my tribe, all the key people. I want to make sure that know I'm cherishing them, right? And that know that I love them and care about them, and that I'm pouring into on a regular basis. I set my goals for the year, what I call living fully dashboard, or another term we use for it is kind of win the year. And so, just a framework to what the really big stuff, the stuff that really matters, what I'm called to do, right? Verse of my life, etc. And what I want my life to look like 30 years from now, and then breaking it down to what am I going to do for that to happen, right? And what needs to happen over the next 5 years? What are the 3 non-negotiables that are going to happen over the next 3 years? And just working backwards to end up with God willing, the life we want.
Gotcha.
Beautiful.
So, and you've talked a lot about just getting incredibly clear on your calling and what is your purpose. And you said earlier that within your business, it's transforming lives through building thriving communities. And so I think that is one of the pitfalls of American society, is that so many people don't have a purpose. And so if somebody's listening to this, like, what can you give me 2-3 steps? Like, how does somebody find what is their why? What is their purpose?
Yeah. I mean, I could spend tons of time on this. So first, a couple things I'd just give as resources. So if you haven't read Purpose Driven Life by Rick Warren, highly recommend it. It's the #1 selling book of all time behind the Bible. Over 50 million copies sold. So we're actually reading it as we do a group called Kingdom Impact Group, which is a Bible study in our company. And we're reading the book right now. We're on day 22. It's a 40-day program. I've read it in the past too, but it's just such great stuff. And so I'd say that's a great place to go to. My favorite book of all time is called Chase the Lion by Mark Batterson.
That's a good one.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. Help you get clear on setting God-sized goals so big that they can only happen through divine intervention. Is a great one. Another phenomenal book, or 2 books, kind of halftime. A really famous book by a guy named Bob Buford, and then the sort of follow-up book to that called Success is Significance. So there's some great books to spend time. I'd say the other and the going through the halftime journey, the halftime program, no matter where you are age-wise, can be a great thing to do. I take a group of 8 or 9 men through this journey every year with the gentleman Lloyd Reeb does the real heavy work of coaching that we look to get clear on purpose, on platform, on philanthropy, on posterity, and on people. Those are kind of the 5 elements. But the first one that we focus on is being clear on purpose. And a lot of times, for people, they think it's just going to, hit them like this. A lot of times it just comes from getting started, right? So if you're thinking about something, you have interest, something breaks your heart, something calls you is just get started, give it a test, fire a bullet, and see if it pulls you in. And I think what a lot of people confuse, and my friend, I know he's been on your show, Tim Tibo, says so well, is a calling is both divine and urgent. And I know a lot of great believers who think, they know what they're called to do, maybe, and they may, but they think, well, because I know what to do and it's divine, it's from God, but that gives me, now I can take my time, right? I can sort of relax and if you know what you're called to do and there's a need out there, there's urgency to take action. And so what gives you that feeling of wanting to go out there and take action and make a difference and change today? And so but those books are some great resources to start with, and just figuring out there's lots of great programs, half times one, to go on and spend the focused time. And then last one is take the time for prayer, for solitude, for quiet, something we as Americans hate to do, right? Imagine, I know this from people could find it impossible to go take an hour and go for a walk without your cell phone, and be in conversation with God. It's amazing the wisdom that'll come to you in taking a little bit of time.
Dude,
That's so good.
Brandon, you talk about massages kind of being that for you, which is but
hour and a half massage, like no phone.
It was amazing.
You have no choice but to listen.
So this last week, I set a daily habit. I don't know if I'll keep it up forever, but I wanted to spend 60 minutes in silence. So phone off, everything's off. And the first 35 minutes are miserable. Like I can't, like I'm worried about what I'm missing. And something happens between that 30 and 40-minute mark where like my mind shifts and I'm creative and I'm thinking outside of the box. And I'm like, why haven't I done this more? Because I'm always so like, I got to do this. I got to do this. And it's tough. But that last 20 minutes, man, I have the best ideas. I like this new profound sense of gratitude, thinking about how great my life is and my like, it's just absolutely amazing. And it takes a good 30 minutes to get there, but just sitting in silence has been a game changer for me.
This is a stupid name for that, but I've been calling it twister time. And the reason I called that is because like your brain's moving like this. And then over the course of like 30, 40 minutes, it starts to circle down on like one thing. And then it gets focused. But it takes people aren't watching this, they can't see my hands moving, but it's like this cloud of messy thoughts. And then it just slowly gets quieter and quieter until so it looks like a tornado or a twister.
I like it. What I find for that, not to stand up, but is I struggle to do it if I'm just sitting still, but I like to walk. So, and it keeps the temptation away. If you leave your phone, for me, I have to bring a notepad and a pen, and I just go walk. And at least I'm moving, I'm seeing nature. And that's the big thing that we can forget to do. Mark Batterson, his newest book called A Million Little Miracles, talks about, do you take things for granted or for gratitude? And there's so many miracles around us all day, every day that we take for granted, that when you take that moment and you're looking at the trees or the grass or anything going on, people walking, right? I mean, it's just, and you have nothing else there. I mean, it's just amazing that the miracles we see around us all day. So for me, being moving versus trying to sit, my phone's like across the room or whatever is hard, but going for a walk helps me clear my mind and get there faster.
Beautiful, man. I love it. Yeah, you mentioned Tim Tibo, and I don't know if we've ever talked about this, but Tim and the Wellspring. So I know you're part of the Wellspring, which is a great mastermind for entrepreneurs. It's like a faith-focused mastermind. But I was actually at an event, the very first Wellspring, where Tim Tibo came and spoke, and that was the day. Like I was literally like planning like what my future is going to look like, and I was going to make all this money. I was shopping for a private jet, and when I met Tibo is when I was like, oh shoot. So then I ended up pivoting that day entirely at 180. And we built the Better Life Tribe, this podcast, all of it as a charity, so to speak. Like we give all the money away to charity. So on that note, one thing we do a little different. Okay, yeah, that's where we hung out in first. Okay, so I was like, it was somewhere we were trying to figure out earlier. So that event changed my life in so many ways, and meeting Tim Tibo, radically altered my life. But so one thing we do different on the show is we give 100% of the profits away from the podcast itself to charities of the guest choosing. So the question for you is, before we air the ad, where are we sending money from this? What breaks your heart? What do you care about?
Yeah. So the answer is I chose an organization called Transforming Futures. But I just want to which is in Guatemala, which I'll explain. But I just want to share a little more. So yeah, so generosity is an area that I can't. I couldn't. We spend the whole time on. I would love to, and it blows my mind how few successful people are generous by any standard of the word, and we need more generosity. There are so many credible organizations, causes, needs out there, and so I think of business as a whole as ministry. I think of our for-profit businesses as ministry. A good friend of mine wrote a book called 94X, which is about the fact that people in our organization spend 94 times as many hours working for you as they do in the church if they go to church, right? Which is why our business are this incredible ministry opportunity for our employees, but also in the work we do in the lives of our clients and so forth. And that's the approach we take. So we host big events, like one we've coming up called our Extraordinary Family Event. We'll have 800 people there. It's $1 million plus event, and that's ministry. We don't make any money. We spend pay a lot of money. It's $1 million plus event. We do that a few times a year. These types of things. We try to pour back and add value to the people in our community. But from the nonprofit side, we have a foundation, a private foundation called the DLP Positive Returns Foundation. And we do a couple things direct, but we find great ministries, those like the Tibo Foundation or John Maxwell's Equip, Hope International, Compassion International. Those are some of the big ones that we're large owners, but we try to, co-work with them, right? So we don't just give money. We try to figure out how can we add value. We come in many cases, help them implement what we call the elite execution system, the system we run in our companies into their ministries. We try to give them stages and opportunities and introduce them to people of value. We try to connect different ministries. So example, one of our big passions is to solve homelessness and to solve it starting in our local market. So we've been touring around the country, meeting different organizations, taking different approaches to homelessness, and we'll fly other groups with us in different markets and introduce them to each other, right? And they never talk to anybody in other markets. And then in our own markets, we have a local homeless faith-driven coalition. We bring all the different organizations together that don't talk to each other in the same market because they're all fighting for the same donor dollars, but we have to work together, right? So we look for a lot of opportunities we can add value in addition to being a financial donor. And one of the organizations we do lots of vision trips with our employees, and we bring our investors on these trips. One of those organizations we support is called Transforming Futures, which is an orphanage an organization in Guatemala that focuses on orphans. So about 15 years ago, the adoption was shut down in Guatemala because people basically buying children. And so now all of a sudden you went from this country where hundreds of thousands of kids a year were being adopted to the system shutting down and all these kids staying in orphanages. And when you turn 18 in an orphanage in Guatemala, you're kicked out on the street. And so we support this organization that mentors and trains 14 to 18-year-old kids who are in orphanages, and then they help equip them, provide them in housing, scholarships, et cetera, to get on their feet. And so that's one of our missions that we're really, really passionate about.
That is absolutely incredible. Everything you just said there. We will definitely throw some money and extra at that organization. That sounds incredible. Dude, so good. All right. We'll be right back after a quick word from this week's show sponsor, where I want to actually dig in, Don, a little bit with you around the idea of faith and money. Because that's a question I get asked all the time. You probably do as well, is how do we reconcile that? But first,
so I know I'm fairly well off financially, right? But did you know I still house hack? Like, that's right. I've got an extra couple units at my house here in Maui, and I decided to actually rent one of them out because, hey, it's like almost $2,000 a month, and I'm an investor, so why not? Do you know the first thing I did when I decided to rent that out? I went to turbotenant.com because there I can advertise the unit, screen for potential tenants, sign the state-specific lease, get automatic rent payments set up, track my income and expenses, and even communicate with my new tenant via the app. It literally made the process so much easier. So whether you've got, one unit or a ton of units, check out turbotenant.com. I love it, and I know you will too. Let them know I sent you.
All right, we're back. So faith, money. Obviously, you're a man of faith. You've got a large, I'm sure, net worth. How do you reconcile those two things? I mean, all three of us are believers, in the Christian faith on this call, but I get that all the time. Brandon, when's enough? Hey, the Bible says money's evil, blah, blah, blah. I get a lot of pushback on this. How do you reconcile those things, faith, money, and how do you keep yourself in check in your life?
Yeah, it's a great question, and the I can't remember the name of the verse, but the verse of it's harder for a wealthy person to get to heaven than the
Camel to go through the
camel.
eye of a needle.
Yeah, exactly. And so, a lot of people use that as kind of the point. And the way I think about it is, for us personally, for our belief is, most everything we earn and most of our, wealth is going to be, given away. Number one. But number two, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, we think of our business as a ministry in and of itself. And so our fundamental core focus of our business is to transform lives through the building of thriving communities. So transformation is salvation. So that's the only form of transformation in my belief. So we want eternal impact with all the people we do business with, and the biggest group is our residents. We have 100,000 residents in our housing communities. This shocks a lot of people. 94 to 95% of residents who live in apartment communities in America are unchurched. 94 to 95%. So on your way to church, you're driving past mission fields. And there's lots of reasons for that. Spend lots of time on it. But so we think of our job starts with providing housing that working families can afford. That's what we're mandated to do. That's our impact mandate. But that's the starting point of our job. Providing safe housing is where it begins. Creating communities where people love one another, where there's real residents serving residents, and where Christ is at the center of that community. There's Bible study, there's disciple making, there's church service going on inside the community, as well as lots of social research, teaching kids to read, teaching financial literacy, helping husbands and wives stay married, right? Because fatherless households is one of the biggest problems we have in this country, and for so many things. And so we think of our business as we're doing good, and we're making an impact on the things we're passionate about. In addition to, certainly we are challenging ourselves every year to be even more generous with our time, with our talent, with our resources. So there's lots of great experts out there. Tim Keller has a great podcast on this topic of wealth. There's a bunch of them out there. I reconciled myself with it, a long time ago. But I think it starts with the purpose of the wealth. And if the purpose is just to buy the bigger jet and a bigger yacht and to live more and more comfortable, that's a problem. But when the goal of growth is to increase our impact, increase the number of lives we're able to affect, certainly here on earth, helping people be fed and helping orphans have a place to go and be educated, as an example, that's great opportunity. The things that organizations like Compassion International are doing are great. Helping young entrepreneurs in third world countries be able to start businesses like Hope International does, it's amazing. But even more importantly, if you feed somebody but you don't tell them about Jesus, you didn't solve anything, is my belief. So, but by serving them and solving their needs on earth, we earn the opportunity to tell them about Jesus, and the opportunity to provide eternal. Make an eternal difference and provide salvation. So that's
so
our
good.
thought to it.
So with that being said, I know that you guys obviously offer clean, affordable housing, but with your 100,000 plus tenants that are living in your communities, what other tactical steps are you taking to help with that transformation process, rather than just, hey, here's clean, affordable housing?
Yeah. So the first part, as you just said, safe, affordable housing, clean, affordable housing, that's not easy, right? We know that we got an affordability crisis in this country, and we can spend a lot of time on that, which happy to, but that's the first starting point. So we got to provide housing that working families can afford. That's hard in and of itself, and limiting into a degree where you can invest with that mandate, which is unfortunate. So that's the starting point. But for us, we've developed this framework, these 10 elements or ingredients of a thriving community. And I'm not at all saying we have it all figured out, but we've been testing and trying things for years, and we're constantly continuing to do so. And so some of the things we do. So first is we reframe our thinking around our job as a landlord. I don't think there's Billy Graham was made famous to say, the Great Commission will be won in the business community, right? For the reasons I mentioned earlier, because we get people so many more hours, so much more time, opportunity to minister. But there's no greater ministry than that of a landlord, because I don't get people for 40, 50 hours a week. I get them for 100 hours a week, right? They're literally there 100%. We live there with them. We know where they live. We're a part of their home with them. So first is reframing our thinking to what our job is and what our responsibility is. Next big thing we do is the way we run our organization and the way we treat our employees who are on site managing these properties, and the empowerment we give them to be forward with their faith, to the empowerment we give to them to figure out how we can serve our residents is a big difference. Another big one is understanding that to a different thought to how do we do this profitably. So a lot of people think, hey, if you're going to be an impact investor and you're going to make a difference in the lives of people, that means you're going to have to give up return. So most people think of impact investing as concessionary. You earn less to do good. That's completely wrong. It's easier to do it that way, and it's still great, right? If you can raise money and make a difference and people take a little bit lower returns, awesome. But our approach is how do we increase the financial outcome so that we can get lots of money to do good, right? So we believe that we increase our profits by loving on our residents. And so I'll give you a couple examples. So in apartment communities today, people move on average every 14 to 16 months. 65 to 75% of people don't renew their lease. Our average is over 80% of people renew their lease. Our goal is to average 8-year occupancies. So if people stay in the community longer, we have lower turnover costs, we have lower maintenance costs, we have higher collections, we have better reviews, we get more referrals. Our NOI goes up by keeping people in the property. And so that's our whole approach, creating a community where they feel they're in a community and they want to stay because their friends live there. They have real relationships. We're serving them. We're serving their kids. So things we do to serve them are after school programming, church services on site, Bible studies, lots of events and get-togethers, financial literacy education, parenting education. We do something called Dream Ons, where if somebody in the community is going through a challenge, we come in and serve them. And I'll just give you a quick example to sum all this up. So in one of my communities, we took over management of, we acquired last July. And is that true? July of 2023. I keep forgetting it's 2025. So July of 2023. And part of the thing, so we acquired a staff who worked there, now became DLP employees. And so I do this thing about once every month where we call Welcome to DLP, and I introduce myself and the company to our new employees. And I do that, and I tell our story and to all new employees, and I tell them about our Dream On program. And so a couple months later, that on-site staff comes to me and they say, hey, we've got a resident here. His name's Sam. And Sam has stage 4 cancer and isn't going to be able to work. He's going to have to go through chemo, et cetera. And we grant a Dream On for Sam. So we give him free housing so that he doesn't have to pay for housing while he goes through treatment. And we make a big deal of it on a day we do called Vision Day. But that day we granted 20 dreams that day, right? So it was wonderful and it was great. And a few months later, we were going through some kind of upper management changes in property management. So I went out to this property. I wanted to make sure the manager knew we loved her and appreciated her and didn't want her to go anywhere, right? And so anyway, I'm out there with her and she says to me, her name's Mandy, and she says, yeah, Don, you don't ever have to worry about me leaving DLP. I'm like, oh, that's great. She said, let me tell you why. She says, the reason is Sam. And I said, oh, well, what's going on with Sam? What's happened? She said, well, great news is he's doing well. He's recovering. He's gone through his chemo. He's doing great. He's back at work. But she said, I never told you this before. I probably should have, but Sam came to me, and this is the manager telling me this. Sam came to me soon after we granted this dream for us, and he had told me that he was just going to die because he didn't think anybody cared about him. So the fact that we gave him this free housing wasn't what made it a thriving community. What made it a thriving community was when the other people in the community found out about Sam's situation, people started driving him to doctor's appointments. People started cooking for him and cleaning for him. The community rallied around him because they knew Sam. So now not only is Sam alive and doing well, but the value that the other members of my own manager says she'll never leave now over it because they know they're a part of a community that cares about each other. Imagine what what that person's going to know it's going to happen if something happens to them, knowing that Sam and others are going to be there to serve, him or her, right? That's what makes a thriving community. People doing life together, people serving one another. And that's missing, right? Most people don't have a friend in the community they live in. The average American today has 1.5 friends. And seldom does that one or two friend live in the same place he or she lives in. They usually don't even know their neighbors. So creating a community where people serve each other is a thriving community.
That story gave me chills, man. That's That's incredible.
Yeah, that's legit, man.
So it's about.
All right. Man, there's so many places we could talk for hours, but I know we got to slowly get you out of here. Maybe the last topic I'd love to hit on real quick. Actually, two more topics real quick. And then we'll move towards the ending. Affordability crisis, you mentioned that. I'd love to talk about that. And I'd love to talk about EES a little bit on what that is and why it's been so effective for you. Which one do you want to hit first? I'll let you choose.
Let's start with EES.
All right. What is it and what do you do with it?
Yeah. So about 12, 13, 14 years ago, we were 6-7 years into our journey. We had 40, 50 employees maybe at the time. And I read a book called Traction that probably a good number of people here have read before. I know you guys have. And I read it and I said, wow, this is awesome, right? Somebody pulled kind of all these concepts and ideas together into clear terminology and systems and whatnot. So I became an EOS implementer, the system Traction's based on, and we implemented it in our company, and it was great. And we were growing fast. And Gino, the author of the book, is a friend of mine. He was here at this event with me these last couple of days as an example. And he was the first person who read my book years later. So, but anyway, what happened as we were implementing EOS is very quickly we were having to bolt on lots of other things. We were having to create tools and systems. We were taking stuff from other things because there just wasn't enough, right? I think EOS is a great system to go from 10 or 20 employees to 50 or $1 million or $2 million of revenue to 10 or 20 million. It's wonderful. It's awesome. I love it. But wasn't enough for us as we grew to 100 million, 200 million, so all of a sudden we realized, 2, 3, 4 years in that we weren't running EOS, we were running something different. So we went and we rebranded that to the Elite Execution System. And it was just for our own uses, right? It was just the system and our terminology and what we were doing. And then, as I mentioned earlier in our interview, I started lending capital, investing capital with other sponsors back in 2014. And on December night, it was a Thursday night in December of 2019, our largest borrower at that time called me. It was like 9:30 at night, he calls me, and he's in a bit of a panic. And I don't really know why he called me, but he's just kind of rambling, and he's telling me how he's having to work 100 hours a week. He can't get anybody who can do their job correctly. He's having to kind of do everybody's job. He tells me he's just so stressed. He tells me he thinks his controller was stealing from him and he had to fire him. And so we're, I don't know, 7 minutes in, 10 minutes into this conversation. I still don't know why he called me, but I'm just trying to give him affirmation, give him support and listen. And this is a guy who I'd put on stage at the dinner events I told you about earlier and say, look at how we helped him, right? Because when I met him, he was a home flipper doing 3 or 4 home flips a year. 5 years later, he has 40 employees. He owns $150 million of real estate. He's doing ground up development, redevelopment, home flipping, rentals, built this business, right? Like, wow, look at how we've helped him grow, right? Anyway, so finally, 10 minutes into this call, he tells me why he called me. That's because he couldn't make payroll Friday morning. It's Thursday night at 9:30. And then he kind of, in one sentence, kind of goes on to tell me, on top of that, my wife is so frustrated with me either not being home or when I am home being so stressed that she filed for divorce and is taking my 2 young kids. So, that was his week, right? Like, can you imagine, right? So if anybody's been, I hope you haven't, but if you've ever been in a car accident, that slow motion feeling, like, when you just, kind of, get in a car accident, that's kind of what it felt like. Like, it felt like somebody just kicked me in the stomach and like my world was just rocked because I thought this was a success story. I helped so much, 5 minutes before that. And now I'm realizing, oh my goodness, we completely missed the mark. And what I mean by that is all we helped him do and anybody else really do was provide him with capital. And in a lot of cases, we were helping him find deals too, to do more real estate transactions. When I had already known for many, many years, the terrible quote that says business would be so easy if it wasn't for the people. And it's a terrible quote, but it's a great point that the hard part of business isn't finding deals and raising capital. It's the inside of the business. It's growing a team. It's building culture, growing leadership. It's putting discipline and structure in our business. That's the hard stuff. And we weren't helping anybody do that. So I helped him make payroll Friday morning. Then we got into his business. We helped him hire a controller, helped him basically put the Elite Execution System into his business. And then I started reaching out quickly to our other sponsors. And luckily, none of them were in as bad of a situation. But I realized quickly that sponsors needed more of that kind of help than they even needed our capital. And so that's when I wrote the first book called Building an Elite Organization, and later wrote a second book called Building an Elite Career. And we built a technology called ES Tools. And we built this whole elite community where we go deep with helping. Number one, it's helping developers, builders, and operators of housing But we also have lots of other business. A lot of our investors who own big companies run our systems in their businesses. We just, it's systems to how do you set clear goals, and how do you manage growth as when you're going through a high growth, how do you manage setting clear priorities, achieving those goals, driving, consistent communication, as you go through rapid growth, and do it all profitably, right? And so that's what the lead execution system is, and it's something I'm incredibly passionate about. I spend more of my time with sponsors, helping them with hiring and developing leadership and culture and putting structure and rigor into their business than I do focused on the real estate deals. And that's what I'm doing. I'm writing a new book right now called Building an Extraordinary Organization, sort of reframing. When I wrote that book, we were 1/8 of the size we are today. I've learned a lot. A lot has developed because we're doing this right now. And that's what the lead execution system's all about. We've grown 50% or more in revenue growth every year for 19 years in a row, following this kind of system of execution.
Dude, so good. I'm a huge EOS fan. Yeah, I'm a huge EOS fan, obviously.
Yep.
But I've heard a lot of people say is you get to a certain level where it's like, well, maybe it doesn't make sense. So, phenomenal.
It's a great system, and ours is really an addition to it, right? EOS doesn't have to go anywhere. Just you end up outgrowing some things. You need more tools, right? More systems for.
It's funny because EOS fits that really nice middle tranche where so I built a thing called REIOS, which is like a real estate operating system for solopreneurs. Because it's hard I tried to run EOS when I was alone. It's just really hard and it doesn't really work as well. So I built my own little REIOS system I teach at the Better Life Tribe, and then you've got that on the other end, and EOS fits nicely in the middle. So I have a group called the 50. It's kind of like Wellspring, but just real estate investors, and not necessarily faith focused. But in there we teach EOS constantly. We're talking about EOS because again, that middle kind of level works really well. So I would love to learn more in the future about the EES stuff. So super cool, man. I literally just also sent a message to my staff at Open Door Capital, and I was like, have you guys read Don's book yet? And Walker's like, yeah, I just finished it. It was awesome. And I was like, all right, good. That's great. All right. Affordability, man. You said there's affordability crisis. What does that mean? And what are we doing about it as a society and you individually?
Yeah. So I'll just frame it a little bit for people.
Please.
So one is, is home ownership and rentership, both serve a purpose and both really important. So right now in America, we have, technically maybe a few months ago was the largest gap ever between the cost of home ownership and rent, right? So it might not be the most, but the past year has been the greatest gap, about $1,300 more per month to own than to rent in the same market, right? So home ownership today, interest rates and increase in prices is more out of reach than ever. And plain simple, most people can't afford. You need to earn about $100,000 a year in the average market in the US to afford the average home with today's mortgage rate. So for most people, homeownership isn't an option today. In fact, it's 18% of Americans can afford the average home in their market today. So that leads rentership, which unfortunately isn't that much better, but is the better alternative. So July of 2023, we surpassed, and it's only gotten worse, first time in U.S. history, where now more than half of American renters spend over 30% of their gross income on rent. And for a long time, 30% of your gross income going to rent is thought to be the threshold of affordability. And you're spending more than 30%, you're having to give up basics of food, education, et cetera, just to afford your housing cost, right? And so now more than half of Americans, it's like 54% of Americans today are over 30% of their gross income, not net income, gross income, that goes just to pay housing. So that's the crisis, right? Income hasn't kept up with the increase of the cost of housing. It's again worst on the home ownership side, but not great on the rentership side, right? And all the best places in the country where people are moving to for all the reasons we know have it the worst, right? Because there's more demand than supply, and it's going to get much worse over the next few years, especially because some of these great markets like where I live in St. Augustine, Jacksonville, MSA, or Orlando, or Austin, or Dallas, or Charlotte, or they did have a lot of supply hit the market in the last couple of years for apartments, but that's being quickly absorbed, and there's going to be a tremendous undersupply, and we're going to see rents soar, which is good for us as investors, not great for the average family. So that's the fundamental crisis that exists, and it exists in every country, every county, every state in this country. There's not many counties who that's not the number one item on on their political agenda is solving affordable housing. I go and do presentations, and investors come to me, oh, you need to come to my town in Greenville. This is a top priority. It's the top priority everywhere.
Yep.
And unfortunately, it hasn't been fast enough. And fortunately, there's not enough solutions. So what we focus on doing is providing housing where our rent is less than 30% of the area median income. Unfortunately, that means we have to start with investing in markets with reasonable incomes, right? So unfortunately, we can't do it where you need it the most, right? So if we're building brand new housing, we need incomes of $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 a year to be able to build housing. There's still great need for that $1,500 a month rental, but there's not enough of it. So that's what we focus on doing. And then we're doing a lot of things to work on public-private partnerships, which is an important part of it. Still the best solution for affordable housing in this country, in my opinion, is manufactured housing. But there's been so much NIMBYism, not in my backyard, in most of the country that it's stopped it. But we've got a number of places where we're developing brand new manufactured housing communities, and we're seeing more places being open to what's still called mobile home zoning, even though they're not mobile homes. And so there's change happening in Florida. There's a Live Local Act, which is probably the best legislation ever written, that basically you don't pay 80% of the property taxes if your rent is 90% or less than your comp set. So that's a really big deal, which really what that does is it forces people to develop smaller units, but that's, kind of a good thing. It's sort of self-fulfilling, but that's a good thing. It's what we need. Right. And so that's where our focus starts is figuring out solutions. And that's what we finance for other developers, builders, operators we partner on. And that's what we do directly. That could be multifamily. Those could be duplexes, townhomes, single family, detached, manufactured housing. Any of those can be affordable for working families.
That's really, really good stuff, man. We see it as well. I mean, I got into mobile home communities back, 7 years ago now for a similar reason. I saw the affordability problem come in. I said, well, I want to be ahead of that. And it's worked out really, really well. I love owning them. I think we have 5,000 or 6,000 homes at this point.
Awesome.
But that's only one. It's like, that's a small solution. The manufacturing, especially like the build to rent stuff, that's a part of the solution. The ADU game, what they're doing down in California, that's part of the solution maybe. I've been playing in the like pad split or like rent by the room stuff lately. I just bought 2 houses in the last week that I'm going to be testing out that idea of like, that's maybe part of a solution. So I think it's going to be multifaceted, but I agree with you when I look at the market and I say like, like exactly what you said about they maybe overbuilt or they built a lot, came on supply. Like our deals in Austin, a vacancy went up to across Austin. I think it's at like 20% right now, which is the highest it's been forever. That will go back down again. And then Austin's going to be just like everywhere else. It's going to just skyrocket. So people think rent's expensive now. It's going to get worse. So the metaphor I use, and then we'll move on, but the metaphor I use all the time is like when we're out there paddleboarding in the ocean here in Hawaii and we're looking for whales, you don't paddle to where you see the whale at. You paddle way in front of it so then the whale comes up to you because the whale's moving, right? So you want to get in the way of that. So like the biggest whale in America that I see is affordability. And that whale is coming. That and old people, like seniors, there's a lot of them coming, and then affordability. And the two really go together because a lot of the seniors they need affordable housing. So trying to think that way of how do we get in front of that whale? And I love that you guys are doing that. That's really, really cool. So keep it up, man.
Amazing.
Thank you.
All right. Well, with that said, let's move on to the next segment of the show. I wish we could talk for 4 hours. We got to come back and do another part 2 sometime in the future. Maybe we'll do that one in person. I'll come to you or something, or you come to me if you need an excuse to come to Maui. All right, let's move on to the next segment of the show. We call this the 3-2-1 pivot. The idea is your life's going one direction and then something just knocks it off to pivot in another direction more positively. So let's start with 3 books that have changed the direction of your life.
So Chase the Lion, I mentioned a little bit earlier by Mark Batterson. I read that book Thanksgiving week every year. I have for about 10 years. My favorite book of all time. Great by Choice by Jim Collins, which, Good to Great's his more famous book on successful companies versus their not less successful counterparties. But Great by Choice is what makes companies successful. And the secret to the book, the secret to successful companies is the 20-mile march, which we spent a lot of time on, but read Great by Choice. And then I'd say the 5 Levels of Leadership by the great John C. Maxwell.
Yeah. Awesome, man.
Dude, because we're doing this on the computer, I've spent about $160 so far doing this podcast.
Books.
Every book that he suggests.
So I finished 81 books last year. Started probably 120. So I read a lot of books. I can give you as many as you want on any topic you want.
I love it.
So cool. Who are two people that have changed the direction of your life?
So I'd say first is a gentleman named Nathan Robinson. So when I was, I skipped over this kind of before, but so when I was going to college at Drexel studying finance, thinking I was being a financial advisor, I waited tables through high school and into early college. And Nathan came into the restaurant I worked at, which at the time was a Texas Roadhouse. So if you ever been to one? Yes, I had to line dance. So Nathan kept coming in, and we would do like a lot of restaurants. Anybody's worked in a restaurant, it would be like, hey, whoever tonight sells the most filet mignon gets $50 or whatever it was, right? And so whatever it was, I was going to get it, right? So everybody was eating filet, right? If that was what the competition was, right? And Nathan's a kind of guy who's run sales his whole career, so he could kind of tell that I was there to pitch something whenever he came in, right? And so anyway, he kept asking me, come work for him, come work for him, come work for him. And so finally I sat down with him, and he was in the security business, the ADT security business. I'd never used an alarm system, never owned an alarm system, knew nothing about alarm systems, but he promised me I'd make $1,000 a week if I came to work for him. No, I'm sorry, he promised me I'd make $2,000 a week if I came to work for him. And at 19, that sounded really good. And so I believed him for some reason. And I came to work for him. I became the #1 sales rep in America for ADT security, which all that meant is I knocked on more doors literally than anybody else. It was a door knocking business. But he was the first entrepreneur I ever met. I remember one day sitting in his truck and I saw his tax return. And I don't think he actually made any money, but like his gross income was like a couple $1 million. It was your proverbial kind of entrepreneur, always starting something new. But I was like blown away, right? And he also happened to be in real estate. So he was a real estate agent at Keller Williams in addition to owning this company. And he's the one who said, you should get your real estate license. You would do really well selling real estate. So that was the first one. The second person that changed my life, I'd say, is my CFO, Bob Peterson. So Bob joined me about 10 years ago. He was the first person I ever hired and paid 6 figures to. I think I could afford somebody at 6 figures. I think he looked at my books. I let him look at it because they were a mess. And I let him tell me what he told me how much he wanted. I think he figured out how much I could afford. But it changed my life because if anybody who is growing a business fast, the #1 role you need, unless you are a CFO, is a CFO, in my opinion. That's the most important job. And it's given me the freedom and confidence and trust knowing you have somebody who's managing, because for us, we have 40 accountants, right? So it's complicated with all things we've gone on. And he's really been leading our bank platform for the last couple of years. We've gone through transition. He's the trustee of my estate along with my wife. He's got a wealth. He worked for one family for 37 years. The parents, they died, handled the transition of billions of dollars of assets to the kids, has this wisdom and experience that you can't learn any other way, and has been so transformational for our growth for the past 10 plus years.
It's amazing.
Superman. All right. Third question of the 3-2-1 pivot. A quote. One quote that either has changed your life or that you live by.
Quote I live by, changed my life. I mean, the verse, my life is too much is given, much is required. I'd say the quote that I stick to and probably I say the most beyond that one is, most have the will to win, few have the will to prepare to win. And probably my employees are tired of hearing me say that, but Tim Tibo said this similarly. I've been saying this for 10 years, but Tim said it just recently. He was on a stage at an event we did in November, and he said, in all my years playing sports, I never found a guy on the team who wasn't ready to play in the championship game or the big game, wasn't excited and wasn't motivated and wasn't full of energy, right? But there were a lot of guys who didn't have that same energy on Tuesday morning, right? Didn't have the same effort to study film, to put in the work in the gym, et cetera, right? It's that preparation. That's the heart of going and answering phone calls, answering emails, jumping from meeting to meeting, being busy. As Tim Ferriss says, busyness is a form of laziness, right? The hard work of preparing and deciding what you're going to do and why, that's the hard work that most people don't want to do.
It's so good.
Perfect. We're going to move into the next little mini segment, past, present, future. So we're going to start with past. If you could go back and give 20-year-old Don some advice, what would that advice be?
I'd say focus, put more focus on relationships than accomplishments. So I think I spent more of my time, much of the last 20 years, focused on what than who, and what I set my goals around and where I put priorities are, and sometimes had, blinders too narrow on focusing on relationships. So I've gotten a lot better on that of the last 5-6 years, but that was definitely a missed opportunity for a lot of years.
For the present question, what is something you've done in the last, call it, year or so, just recently, maybe a habit or a routine or a change in your life? It could be a purchase. So something you've done or got that's made your life better.
So I'll say, I'll go. I mean, I could go with lots of them, but I'd say the tonal, which
cool.
is workout machine that you do at home. You might see the commercial, kind of like the one called the Mirror, but it's an amazing workout machine because not only can you do any workout in the world on one machine, but it's got AI in it. It tracks, and naturally adjusts your strength and your reps and gives you all the data and insights if you're actually improving, getting stronger, and which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, very cool. I've heard good things about that.
It's really cool.
You need one in your office there.
I know, in my gym office thing here.
Yeah.
I know. I was debating it, man. Yeah, I've been debating it. So.
I still keep a whole gym full of stuff because sometimes you just like to pull out the real weights, but it's been awesome.
Awesome.
Very
and
cool.
Then for the future question, and I like to reword this. It's kind of like, what do you want your legacy to be? But I like to reword it in a different way, especially you, because you obviously are an incredible dad, and someday, like way down the line, you're gonna pass away, and you're gonna have your funeral, and your kids are gonna get up and they're gonna talk about you, Don. And what do you want your kids to tell the world about their dad?
So I wrote something similar to this probably about 5-6 years ago that I use, and it's part of the personal compass. It's what do you want to be remembered for? And so I just pulled it up and I'll read it here. So the first sentence is, I want to be most famous in my own home. So that's really big to me, right? If you guys are on a podcast like this, right, it's easy for me to represent myself as so intentional and doing all these amazing things, right? If I come home, my kids say, man, he's a fraud. That's not really how we live. Or, he's on his phone all evening, right? He's never home, right? He makes up these extraordinary, whatever, right? If they don't think I'm so amazing, right? None of it matters. So I want to be remembered, most famous in my own home, as an incredible leader who built an extraordinary organization that led millions of people to salvation through the building of thriving communities while giving generously to those he loved and to those in need, with a focus on children and the next generation.
Dude,
beautiful.
I love the fact that you took the time to write that. I think that's so important for people. Kind of going back to what you originally started with, of like having that future vision, and then aligning with that every single day. So I love that.
That's awesome. All right, let's wrap things up. First of all, what's coming up in your life that you're excited about? I know you won 5 championships of something, right? Can you explain that too?
I'm a 5-time flag football champion. Coach with my 2 older kids, so we're working on. Awesome. I'll tell you in 3 weeks if we won number 6.
Nice.
But bigger from business standpoint. That's a big one. But a business standpoint, we're doing a merger of our bank called DLP Bank with another bank right now. So that should close the next 90 days. So really a lot goes into that. Really excited about that. Heading to New Zealand for the month of March with my family. So that's our favorite place on earth, Queenstown, New Zealand. So we'll be there for the whole month.
I'm going to be in New Zealand in March.
Really?
I'll be in Australia, but I'm headed over to New Zealand afterwards. So that's funny.
Yeah, not in
Maybe
March
I'll
at all.
look you up if I'm in the same place. What?
You won't hit New Zealand at all in March?
I will. I'll hit it. I have to go to Australia for a conference to Australia. And then I'm like, well, as long as I'm there, I've never been to New Zealand. Let's go check that out. So I'm going to go jump over there.
I'll tell you all the places. We'll be all over the country, but Queenstown mainly. So hopefully we can meet up. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, that'd be awesome, man. That'd be legit. Very cool. All right.
Super cool.
Last question then.
Last question, Don. Where can people find out more about you, your books, your company? Where can people find you at?
So our main company website is called dlpcapital.com. Tons of free resources and tools are on there. You'll be able to see, including all the different downloads we talked about, all the different events we do virtually and live are all on there, almost all of which is free. Of course, any social media platforms. And then I have a podcast called Impact with Don Wenner. Find anywhere you get your podcasts. So find us any of those places.
Amazing. Awesome, man. Well, Don, this has been a phenomenal episode. I absolutely loved every second of it. So I'd love to get you back sometime in the future. We'll do a follow-up if you're up for it. And man, I'd love to dig in even more. So thank you.
Love to. Thank you both, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Better Life Podcast. We hope you enjoy the show. I hope you got some valuable insights to help you lead a better life for you and your family. Now, hey, if you found value in this episode, please consider leaving us a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback helps us to improve the show, helps us reach more people with this message of living that better life. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. And hey, before I go, this show is all about the habits, actions, beliefs, and strategies that can give you a better life. But in case you're interested and you want to know my opinion on what it takes to live the best life, not just better, and that's from like a more spiritual and faith standpoint, check out abetterlife.com/bestlife. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time on the Better Life Podcast.